Welcome to the seminar from the Center for Teaching Excellence. This seminar is also being co-sponsored by the College of Arts and Sciences. Today we have with us Dr. Ed Neal, who will be speaking about effective multiple choice testing. And Ed is trained as or started his career as a professor of Russian history. And for, I guess, about 30 years has been an educational consultant, helping faculty through workshops, individual consultations, and a number of other type of activities to improve their teaching. He was the person who started the first faculty development or teaching development programs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he has been recently the director of their equivalent of our Center for Teaching Excellence, and he continues to serve in this capacity now that their center has expanded there to also meet some other needs. He speaks, gets invited all over the country to do these types of events, and so we're really fortunate that we're able to have him here today. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, glad to see you here this afternoon. What are we going to do today? I want to accomplish really three things. First, review some of the basic problems with multiple choice, their construction, how to overcome them. Second, to examine the use of multiple choice items for measuring higher order learning, critical thinking. And third, in the last few minutes, we will have a nod to some of the test item analyses that I think are valuable. They're really I've tried to simplify these so that we're not going to deal with a lot of mysterious statistics. We just take it down to the basics so you understand what to look for when you get your printout. There's a disclaimer here. You are probably already familiar with many of the concepts we're going to be talking about today, but I hope that a review will be beneficial. I have a sign in my office that says, "Everything has been thought of before. The problem is to think of it again." So we want to just sort of sit back and take a long view of this and see how can we make better tests. Ground rules, please. If you have a question, go ahead, raise your hand, interrupt. We will there's some interactive kinds of exercises we're going to be doing, so you will be working. Do you have any questions before we start? No? Okay. Let's have a test. Page 3. Testing is measurement. Measurement requires validity and reliability. Now what I'd like you to do, just in your own words, fill out the answers to those two questions. A valid evaluation method or instrument must do what? A reliable evaluation method or instrument must do what? And then if you can think of some examples of threats to validity and reliability, jot those down as well. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer those questions. Okay, pens down. I'll take a volunteer. How about you in the orange top there, please? What was your definition of validity?
Valid evaluation method or instrument that must measure what you want to measure.
Must measure what you want to measure. I see nods all around. Anyone have a slightly different version of that they would like to?
Credible.
Okay, credible is good. Jed?
I have almost identical words to the...
Okay, very good. So, yes, back there.
Must measure the truth as determined by others within the field, by the professionals.
Okay. So we're all talking about making sure that the test measures what it's supposed to measure, and you're suggesting that that ought to be the stuff that we all agree is the right stuff. All right, so it's valid. What about reliable? What did you have for reliable?
I have some standards, testable, measurable.
Okay. I think you're reaching for something important there. How about you? Okay. You get the same result every time you measure the same event. If you give a test today and over a particular set of material in one class, you give it to another class, you should not have wildly different responses to those items. Assuming the students study the same. So it has to be a consistent result. Consistency is another good synonym for reliability. So these two things are the things we always have to keep in mind, whatever kind of test we're giving. It gets harder, some kind of testing. Essays. Essays are harder because it's harder to ensure validity and reliability unless you construct them very, very well. Nominally, you would think that multiple choice tests, because they are fixed format exams and you have a lot of control over the wording, that they would be automatically more valid and reliable, but that is not always the case, as we know. What are some of the threats to validity and reliability of multiple choice tests? Give us one.
I put two. I put maybe different raters scoring test, using untested questions perhaps.
Okay. Well, with multiple choice, you probably wouldn't have that. But with essays, it would certainly. But the other one was that using untested items, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about here about how you determine whether an item is good. And of course, what the people at Princeton do at the SATs and other things is that they put items on these exams that are not graded, they're not scored until they see how they work. But we don't have that luxury typically. I'd like you to try to explain to a student why, okay, there were 55 items, but we only got scored on 53 of them. How come? That's not going to go over very well with your students. So we have to figure out other ways to make this happen. Okay, that's a good one. Other threats, please.
Trivia? Trivial questions?
Trivial questions, yes. I was really good at those in the early days. The ones that, the fine differences between things, or, the words on page 72. We all started out in error and in sin, but we have moved on now because we know a lot more about testing these days. As a matter of fact, one of the things that is easy for you to do, if you Google multiple choice testing, you'll turn up all kinds of lovely little handbooks and manuals that are online. They're wonderful. So it's not an absence of information that is our problem. It is a lack of time to do the right thing. And that is the big problem. Yes, you had a suggestion.
Questions that require knowledge outside the material actually being tested.
Okay, that's a threat to validity, certainly. You're asking something they would be reasonably expected to answer. So there are a number of things that can go wrong. And if you look at the next page, whoops, there we go. This is a summary of technical item flaws from the National Board of Medical Examiners. Notice at the bottom of the page there, it has the URL for the NBME. This is the finest test manual in the world, and it is completely free. You can go to it any time and get all kinds of lovely ideas. And from that site, I have excerpted these problems with typical problems with multiple choice. The first category are the things that are related to test wiseness. That is, after students have had multiple choice tests most of their lives, they get very, very good at being able to eliminate some of the distractors so that it gets down to either a 50-50 choice or maybe even, aha, I can figure out exactly which one this is, even if they haven't studied. So what we need to do is worry about these things. Now, these are pretty easy if you have time to go over the test. We give grammatical clues where the stem ends, they have an and then you have a problem with beginning with a vowel or beginning with a consonant. Logical cues, using absolute terms, always or never. That's if you're going to give 4 or 5 choices and one of them is always and one of them is never, I'm going to eliminate those 2 right away and go for the others. The long correct answer. Typically, what faculty will do is write the stem, then write out the answer. Okay, what do I do now? Well, I have to come up with the not answer. And these often are shorter. And so if I'm guessing, I'm going to guess the longest answer. All right? The other thing is word repeats in the stem and in the items, that is the alternatives, and convergence, where the answer, the correct answer includes most elements in common with the other options. So you simply look for the one that contains everything, and you eliminate the ones that contain fewer of those options, of the things that you're looking for. I mean, these are all standard tropes for people who are trying to figure out how to take a multiple choice test. Now, why do you think students rely so heavily on these things? You can't know everything. It's what?
They work.
They work. They don't have time to study. Oh, they do work. Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, why not? Why? Yes, exactly. Why ignore something that's going to help you out? Yeah. It's us and them. It's us against the professors, and every little advantage we can get, we're going to use. So one of the things we have to do is think about how do we eliminate this whole dynamic, so that we sort of get them on our side in terms of testing and avoiding these kinds of things, of course. The other set of technical flaws, a lot of faculty think that when we have long, complicated options, that it makes the test more valid because it's measuring, it's more difficult. But that is not the case. The NBME has data going back for years on these things, that just by the mechanical act of making the items more complicated does not make them measure anything better. What you're trying to do here is measure learning, and this stuff gets in the way. The long, complicated double options, numeric data inconsistent. When if you've got several options there, and one is in grams and one is in meters, and you've got you're giving or grams and ounces or something else. It just they have to spend so much time figuring in the margins trying to convert these things that you're just making it very difficult without really measuring much of any use. Terms in the options are vague. Language in the options is not parallel. Options are in non-logical order. None of the above. Oh, that's one of our favorites. Because we come up with the answer, and we come up with the not answer, and then we strain and heave and come up with one more not answer. And then what do we do? None of the above, right? So that's how we end up putting that on there. Of course, students aren't fooled, If you're going to use none of the above, it ought to be right 25% of the time in your test. because typically you only have one or two of those in a test, and the students can look at it and say, okay, I know what's going on here. So we need to avoid these traps, tricky stems, complicated stems, answers hinged to the answers in previous or subsequent, well, previous items, so that if you get one wrong up here, then you're not able to answer this one down here. It's related. So these are all bad things. These get in the way of validity and reliability. Do you have any others you'd like to point out? Any of your favorite egregious practices that you've seen? Yes?
I was going to ask about the non-logical order because one of the things I've been taught to do was to, after I've made up my questions, then put the answers in just alphabetical order so that we just get a random. So I'm not always making C the right answer or whatever, and I'm not really aware of.
Oh no, I
where
think
it's
this
being
refers
done.
to this refers to the options being in non-logical, the options to an item being in non-logical order.
These are the answers, like if one, if one was a nurse, a doctor, a respiratory therapist, then you would alphabetize those answers so that it's not any kind of logical. What kind of non-logical order are they speaking
Well, I
to
think
then?
they're talking about things where you have a material that was presented in a particular order, A, B, C, D, E, in your lectures, in the book, and so forth and so on.
The whole test.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So that these items, when you're looking at an item that is testing, one string, and you scramble them up, it can confuse the student, and really, even students who actually know the answer say, wait a minute, these aren't in the order in which I remember them.
Yeah, where did this come from?
Where did this come from? And they start questioning themselves. So that's it. But I'm glad you pointed that out. Any other favorites that you've seen? There's one of mine. Lots of people who teach in sciences, both basic and applied, use graphs and charts and drawings. And sometimes in the process of duplication, things get truncated. And so, part of the graph is missing, and students and the professor not doing due diligence and reviewing the test carefully doesn't realize that. And lots of people get it wrong. Some people get it right randomly, just blindly guessing. But there are all kinds of things that can go wrong and that will threaten validity and reliability of your test. Now, to illustrate these principles, let's take a test. On page 5. Now, this is Tauroscatology 101. And I want you to, actually, it would be better if you paired up, because this is a very difficult test. And if you could pair up and take the test jointly, it would be helpful, because I'm not going to give you a whole lot of time here. You can kind of just help each other out. You've already answered the questions.
Yeah, but I didn't realize you said it.
I don't know. And then we have our. We've got the and. Okay. You go with the dingles. It is R.
You're having way too much fun taking this test. You're not supposed to do that, you know.
You can if you can think of something you hadn't thought of before.
That's right.
And I keep a collection of mechanical pencil erasers on the test for some students, and I'll give it back if you can tell me why you're changing it.
Up here. If you finish early, check your work. Okay. Okay, it looks like most of you have finished. This is only 5% of your final grade, so you don't have to worry about the grade on this one. So, we have some very important questions here. And let me have a show of hands here. For number 1, how many said A? Oh, you got it right. Everybody got an A on number 1. Why did you choose A? Okay, the word in the stem was the same as the word in the option. Fairly simple. What about number 2? How many said A? Nobody. How many said B? 100%. Very good. Why did you say B? Longest answer. See, if I hadn't gone over these things earlier, do you think you would? No. Anyway, number 3. We're getting a little bit more difficult here. Number 3. How many said A? How many said B? How many said C? How many said D? Looks like the majority said C. Why did you say C? Okay, the other ones are absolutes. They are always, and never, whereas C is usually. So, good choice.
I didn't see that.
Okay, number 4. A, B, C, D. Everybody got D. Grammatical clue, right? It has to be D because it's the only one that begins with a vowel.
Right.
Oh,
You got it wrong.
well, I got it wrong the first time, but then I wouldn't change my answer. You got it right, but not for the right reason.
Oh, what reason did you use? Why did you change it?
Number 7.
It's what?
Because number 4 is knittering and oostables, and number 7 is oostables and knittering.
Oh, well, you read way ahead, though. You see
Well, I
that?
went back and changed my answer to 4. So I got because I said knittering. I've seen that word somewhere before.
Aha. That's the way it works. Whether or not, well, you see, you got the answer.
right, but not-
You got it right for the wrong reason, which is always possible.
Now what?
An unreliable instrument.
Yes. Okay. What about number 5? Now this is a little subtle here. How many of you said A? A majority. How many of you said B? Couple. C. 1. D. Nobody. Well, those of you who selected A, why did you select A?
Because it asks which are, and that's the one that would logically go with that.
Yeah, there are 2 things. There are 2 things in the option. You see how this gets, we started out funny, I can't make those kinds of mistakes, but then we're getting into the ones that we can make pretty easily. Okay, number 6. Pretty easy, isn't it? Everybody say B? Yes, because it's in every other answer, and so it's got to be the one. And number 7, Number 7 takes some thought. Anyone think they have the answer? C? C, why did you say C? It relates back to number 4. So you're looking at, you're thinking right here. This is how to game the system. Now number 8 is peculiar. Which of the following is the correct answer? A, B, C, D, E. C, B. Who said C? Why did you pick C?
Because it's always the right answer.
It's in the middle.
No
It's in the middle. There is a central tendency here. We tend to hide the correct one in the middle. But if you had other answers, let me hear your arguments. How many had E? Nobody? How about D? Why'd you say D?
Because the test is A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D.
Oh, right. There was a pattern. Gee, was that deliberate, do you think? Now, because there are no words beside those options, I will take any of the options as long as you have a good argument. That was a good argument. I'll accept that. C is a good argument because it's the middle. Some people sometimes choose E because all the others are only 4, and here's one with 5, so maybe it's the 5th. But you see, this is the kind of thinking that students use to try to figure out what the answers are when they don't know.
Should we teach students this?
Well, it would keep us honest, wouldn't it?
12 years of education is taught in.
They probably already know most of it, except for the poor people who went to schools, or who went to schools where they had essays instead of multiple choice.
And I have students that tell me things like, well, I chose
C, because you'd had 4 answers in a row that were D, and the 4 after were obviously D. And I said, well, didn't you notice that all my answer options are in alphabetical order for every test on every item?
Well, you need to, I think it is good to tell them these things, to warn them. Say, I randomize the answers, and don't look for patterns because.
Don't make out the key till after y'all take it. So I have no idea if there's 10 D's in a row.
All right. So these are things that but they think it's, well, there's a little strip, a Charlie Brown cartoon, a Peanuts cartoon, where Charlie Brown is talking to his little sister Sally, and she wants him to help her with her test. He said, "What kind of test is it going to be?" She says, "Mystical guess." He says, "You need multiple choice."
Yes.
So it's pretty mystical to a lot of them. So
I think it also goes back to that a lot of students think that the professor is trying to trick them.
Yeah.
And whereas if we can get to the point where we're actually trying to teach them to see what they're learning and not trick them.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. So many of them. And, the bigger the class, and more likely that you're going to use multiple choice, the more likely it is that they feel disassociated from you. And it's harder for them to relate to you as a human being because you're way up there and there's 400 people in the classroom or something like this, or 250. And so this kind of cultural sets in. They have, especially if it's a difficult topic, if you're teaching in the sciences or something, or some arcane branch of philosophy, then they really feel as though, they have a thing to stand on, So they're going to use every opportunity they can to try to get an edge. And this is their edge. So, how many of you use a test bank supplied with a textbook? Anyone? Oh, good. Good.
They're so awful.
Yes. Do you know why they're awful? Do you know who writes those test items? Yeah. Not the author of the textbook. He or she doesn't want to spend time making up multiple choice tests. So you pay a graduate student, $3 an hour, and they don't know anything. They don't know anything about testing and about technology, any of this stuff. They don't know any of these principles. They just put them together the way they were. These look like the ones we've always had. Now, in fairness, I will say that some textbook publishers have caught on to this problem and actually do go to the extra expense of hiring people who know something about testing. So not all test banks are bad. But sometimes you inherit test banks from other teachers. So one thing we need to do is look at how would we look at these items. I like to keep things simple. There's only 5 questions you really need to ask, and they're on page 6 here. 5 questions you really need to ask yourself when you're looking at test items. And these deal with validity and reliability. Like number 1, the item as a whole. It measures a knowledge or skill component which is worthwhile and appropriate for the examinees who will be tested. That's validity. There is a markedly better way to test what this item tests. In other words, why are you using multiple choice if there's a better way to do it? It is of the appropriate level of difficulty for the examinees who will be tested. These are not deep philosophical questions. These are fairly straightforward. Considering the stems, look at the wording, look at how it lays out. Considering the alternatives, are they parallel? Do they fit logically and grammatically? Always going for more concise wording if possible. And whether or not one answer logically excludes the others. And so on and so forth. These are things, if you're using a lot of multiple choice, I would take this page and paste it up on above your desk so that you can just kind of, every time, just to remind yourself, to think of it again, as we said at the beginning, to think, okay, let me just take another look at this thing and make sure that I'm in good shape here. Now there is, and we'll get to this at the end, there are statistical tests that help us in the end, but we don't have that until after the test comes back, after the answers come back. So we want to make the best test we can going in, and these guidelines will help us. Now, another issue here is sampling. Now, professional psychometricians always develop test blueprints so that you have the different topics, different levels. Here we have kind of a simplified taxonomy. You're familiar with Bloom's 6 levels. With this recall, application, and evaluation, you can keep those 3 in mind pretty easy. 3 different levels: low, medium, high. And these are test items. Topic 1, item 2, question 2, question 9, question 4, question 21, question 33, and so forth. So that you see the ones that you spent the most time on, the ones that are the most important, are sampled more deeply. And you see topic 4, obviously, must be very important at the highest level because there are 3 questions at the evaluation level for that one. So a simple little graph like this, just sketch it out, will begin to show you whether or not you are sampling validly the universe of items that you could ask, and whether or not you have ended up like most of the tests that faculty bring to me are all down there at the lower level, recall, application. Very, very few up here at the evaluation level. Now that's okay if you're only teaching at the lowest level, but we've been urged by people to teach critical thinking, to teach the upper levels, to teach problem solving, and then, but if there's nothing on the test that tests that, then we're not, the test is not valid. It is not measuring what we taught, at least not all of what we taught. Have any of you ever used a test blueprint before? No? You did?
Not exactly like this, but similar.
Did it help?
Yes, I do it for all my tests. I go through my objectives and I make sure the topic matches my objectives, and that if I've spent 3 days on this topic and 2 days on this topic, that I have the right number of questions and that they're...
You get an A for today. That is wonderful. Yes?
I find it interesting. I'm an assessment coordinator.
Oh, good.
And I ask, we're trying to really focus on course-embedded assessment. So of course, there's learning outcomes. And I'll ask the instructor, give me your syllabus. What are your students supposed to learn? And just give me a sample of so many questions and just send me those answers, and I'll use those in my analysis. And I had one instructor just give me the final exam. Here it is. You tell me which ones you want to use. And I find this very useful because a lot of times I may not necessarily know the content of that course. I mean, I have a business background, but still, I remember all those courses from years ago and all the content. And I think this would be very useful for me to kind of do this when I'm presented with that situation again to try to kind of go through, because a lot of times our faculty are not going to do this. Like he just gave me the exam and said, pick the questions you
pick
want.
the questions you want.
And tell me what you want, from me. So.
Well, I have used this with my faculty at Chapel Hill. And just sort of, and the good thing is that there's no jargon up here. Recall, do you remember it? Application, can you apply it? Evaluation, can you form a judgment? Can you do some thinking about this? We're not burdening them with a lot of terminology here. And it's simple enough. Simple is always better. I believe in that. We can keep 3 levels in mind and sort of look at these tests and say, okay, I see where most of my items are recall items. They only have to remember the choice and be able to pick them out. And so is that the question that I would always ask is, of course, is that what you want? Mm-hmm. Is that what you taught? Sometimes the answer was yes, that's what I taught, that's what I want, and okay. Well, but that means then that we have to kind of consider, well, maybe we need some development here about teaching at a higher level, but that's another issue. What this does is gives us a very simple little way to go at it and say, okay, what levels are we testing, and are we validly sampling all the possibilities? Because there are thousands of questions that could be asked on these different levels. So focusing on this, I have found this to be a useful tool. In your handout, we have 2 examples, one from nursing. Now it uses 4 levels, knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis. But the one down below is adolescent psychology, and it has recall, application, and evaluation. As a matter of fact, I think I pulled the numbers, since I didn't want to have to make up new numbers and do the calculations. I just used those. But you can see that the topics here, topic D was probably really, really important. They probably spent a lot of time on that. And so that is what, this is very much unlike when I first taught in 1968, my first class. First time I'd ever been in front of a class. I was an assistant professor. Lyndon Johnson was still president. And about a week before the first exam was scheduled, a student raised his hand. It's always a he. And he asked me the question. What question did he ask?
Going to be on the exam.
What's going to be on the exam? What's going to be on the test? Oh, we hate that question. And we have a stock answer, don't we? What did I tell him? Everything. All my lectures up to next Tuesday and everything in the book until chapter 17. He was not happy. But that was the way we handled it in those days. And so I went back to my office after class, and I said, gee, I better make up an exam. And so I went through my notes, and I thought, oh, that's a good item. Well, here's another one. Sort of randomly, ran across one day when I knew a lot of them were absent. I happened to get 5 questions off of that day. Went through the book the same way. Well, if they really read this book, then they should be able to answer this question. And so I gave them the test. What do you think happened? Actually, no. I had a perfect bell-shaped curve. Because if you know statistics, bell-shaped curves are associated with what? Random events. If you're guessing every answer, then you're going to get I could give you a 10-point quiz in here. Just say a true false, and just randomly select. You write down true or false, and then I make up a key. And not even asking you any questions, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, true, false, true, whatever you want. And there would be a perfect bell-shaped curve in your responses. So that was in the bad old days. I have recovered from my sins, and now I don't do that kind of thing anymore. But that's the way all of us did it. And so, we had no idea about this kind of thing, or about thinking about levels, or about thinking about sampling. And so we need not to do what we have done in the past. So this is a good technique. Now, we have an example here on page 8 of multiple choice items at different levels of the taxonomy. We have a simple one, knowledge. These are all in the sciences. Knowledge, which of the following are the raw materials for photosynthesis? Which is rote recall. You better know. You better be able to just drag that out of your memory. There are a lot of things we teach that we expect students to be able to do that. Terminology, vocabulary, various kinds of formulae. Comprehension, okay, that's translation. That is, you remember something and you kind of have to translate it, put it in your own words. If living cells similar to those found on Earth were found on another planet, where there's no molecular oxygen, which cell part would most likely be absent? Notice the way that is phrased. So that the student has to know what cell part processes oxygen. So it's recall at one level, but then it is comprehension because they have to translate into a different form. Application, that's, this is a calculation. That's always nice if you're in a field where you can use calculations, because you can figure out all the different errors one can make in that calculation and put those down as alternatives. It's beautiful. Analysis, okay, this requires breaking something down into its component parts, explaining how things work. Now, in a fixed format exam like this one, analysis, the question is, which of the following observations is most cogent in supporting this statement? So you have to think about it, and you have to reason, and it takes longer. See, here, we're getting in... Well, yes, but you would be wrong. So the point here is that you can ask these questions, but they're going to take the students longer to respond to. And so...
that means that there's a couple of right answers here.
Yeah, a couple of possibilities. And so that's a scary one. That's one that gets, they will sit there and really spin on this one for a while. Then evaluation. Notice we skipped synthesis because if you know about the taxonomy, synthesis requires the creation of something new, and if it's a fixed format test, you can't create something new. You can do that on an essay. But we can skip to evaluation, and we have disregarding the relative feasibility. Which of these lines of research is likely to provide us with the most valid and direct evidence as to evolutionary relations among different species? Whoa! Notice there are no guessing the right answer here. The higher level question you ask, the more difficult it is to pull those tricks that we were talking about earlier. Also, it's easier to write the alternatives. So you see, there's a couple of reasons why one might want to consider using more and more of these higher level questions, because they require more from the student, more thinking from the student, and they are easier for us to write without making a mess of things the way we often end up doing. So and as I say, guessing is beyond it. With something like this, they really have to think it through. Now, question is, if you tell your students they're going to have a multiple choice test, how are they going to study?
Memorize the notes.
Memorize the notes, knowledge, facts, all the bold-faced terms in the textbook, and so forth and so on. So they need to know that that's not going to be the entire test. They need to know that you're going to test them on their thinking skills. Now, you might say, well, you can maybe give them some sample questions in your syllabus. Say, these are the kinds of questions I will ask in addition to the other kinds of multiple choice. But that's still not as good. Because at some primitive level, they're still thinking in terms of memorization here. You have an idea about how you could do this?
Well, you want to encourage those higher level thinking skills in the class.
In the class.
So it's not just something new that's going to...
Right. So one could actually have a lesson in which you pose a question, put it up on a slide, and then have, the answers and say, okay, Now let's work through this today. And I'm going to give you a little mini lecture, and then I'm going to have you work on something and so forth. By the end of this class, you will have learned how to answer this kind of question. Okay, then you can expect me to ask this kind of question on the exam. So there's no great gap here. Some will still not believe you and do the wrong thing, but that's they will learn eventually. So one of the things we have to do is make sure that there is, if we are breaking with tradition, so to speak, we need to make sure that they understand what is in store for them when they walk into that exam.
Yeah, because if all you are doing is modeling in your classroom recall, H2O is hydrogen, oxygen, then that's what they're going to be thinking of things that we'll have on the exam. But if you
Pose the questions. Pose the questions. And I like, one of the things I like to see on PowerPoint is multiple choice questions. So that you pose a difficult question and you've got these 4 or 5 answers that are all really analytical, and you can have them, you could do things like have them pair up and say, okay, in your pairs decide which answer you think is correct and develop an argument for that. And then still don't tell them the answer until all of the thinking has been spilled out, so that those who are in error will go ahead and declare their error and say, we think it is this way because. But it is a way to illustrate both the testing technique and what you really want them to do, what you really want them to think about, rather than just memorize stuff. So these are all very important. And how are we doing here time-wise? We've got enough time, because I'm going to give you an example of a real live test on page 9. And working in pairs again. Oh, first of all, let's just read the 2 paragraph setup here. Just read the 2 paragraph setup. Okay, so this is Psych 101. This is the basic survey course in psychology. Now, there are 4 questions asked about this case. What I'd like you to do is, working in pairs, try to see what kinds of thinking does this test measure. If you're accustomed to using the taxonomy, go ahead and use those labels. If you want to use other kinds of labels, that's okay. But sort of work together and look at each one of these questions and try to decide what you think, what level you think it is, what kinds of thinking does it measure. Work together.
I think the application is further than just comprehension. You just have to be able to. That would be recall. That would be not. Yeah.
And the light on the screen.
They're looking at a computer.
James?
I would say
And then
C.
they'd come up to me.
The size of the lungs are. What do you think?
What was the disease? I'm trying to see. Let me look at it. Most important to control for. The highway department. I don't want to read too much into it. They're clear. Everybody's a driver, right?
Remember the Hawthorne effect?
No, but you have to tell me what it is.
Okay, what's our effect? Learn change after a while, and then it becomes second nature. I think the size of the light.
The size of the light.
Yeah, because what that would do is continue to make sure there wasn't color correlation.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. I think that's
One of the results you obtain is response time.
What about number 7? Well, when we start going over these, you voice those opinions, all right? I want to hear what you have to say. Okay, let's see what kinds of choices you've made here. I'd like to say one thing about this is that this is an actual page from an actual exam. So, there are some flaws in here, but what I use it because it is a real live exam. It is something that somebody put together, and we might may even make suggestions at some point about how it could be improved. But what I like about this is to use it as a test bed here for looking at test items. Was it difficult for you to try to decide levels? Well, why is it difficult? didn't have the definitions. Okay, we didn't go over those real well. So this isn't a valid test of your knowledge, then, is it? Because you weren't given an opportunity to learn the different levels, right?
It was difficult for me because I wanted to answer the questions rather than answer your.
Yes, we're trained. We academics are trained. Gonna try to answer the quiz. That's another problem. Right. Have you ever subjected your own exams to this kind of analysis? Item by item?
Yes.
Good. Good. That's good practice. Those of you who say yes, that is very, very good. You have to look at it and sort of, but even if it's, even if you don't really know what you're looking for here, to know what would a student have to do in order to answer this question? What thought pattern would they have to follow? Now, you expect me to tell you the answers, right? You know, what levels? Well, we could argue, and if we had world enough in time, I often do that. I say, well, what argument do you have for calling this, say, comprehension or something else? But I think the important thing is not that we label them, but the fact that they are all above the knowledge level. You know, the first one here, how many independent variables is, the typical test question for psych is, the definition of an independent variable is, boom, 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 which is rote recall. All of these questions require that the student do something with the knowledge that they have, applied to this particular case that they have. Case studies are great. And actually, yes, go ahead.
Just discussing, because we're trying to teach in nursing, we're trying to teach application. We want to be able to take these facts and apply it to you as a patient. So, been trying to use case studies. Did this summer, is to prepare them, and had multiple choice questions on the case as part of the class to prepare them for the test. And they came to me after the first test and they said, but Ted, he had multiple sclerosis, and this is the right answer because that's what happens in multiple sclerosis. And I said, well, that case, and here's your printed copy that I gave you. It says Ted has Parkinson's.
They don't necessarily read. Well, one of the problems is.
Well, we went over it, and they had a printed copy to take home with them. So maybe if they heard wrong.
Yeah.
But
Well, this is, you can't save them all. But, you can't save them all. But the idea is that if you're accustomed to writing essay questions, and then you get a big class, and you no longer have time to grade all the essays, this essentially was transferred from an essay question. It was a case in which the professor originally asked, several questions related kind of to these.
For number 4, probably the same question.
It probably is. So we have, that's one of our clues as to how we move from lower level multiple choice to higher level, is think about what kind of essay question would I ask if I could ask an essay question? How then can I present that in a format that they can then give me very specific answers to these things in which they really have to think about it. Always want them to think. So we have some more on page 10. EMS exam. First one, a 32-year-old man is involved in a motor vehicle crash. You note that the steering wheel is bent. During your initial assessment, you note his pulse is rapid and weak. And his radial pulse disappears when he inhales. Which of the following injuries is most consistent with these findings? I don't think you guessed the answer there. I think you have to know something about this.
I'll say C.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes. but the thing is that these are diagnostic questions. These are questions that students, you're really testing whether or not they understand. And these are the kind of people I want to have that kind of training, The EMS people who show up at my door when I'm having a heart attack, I want them to have been trained this way.
But you want your nurses trained this way too. Yeah. I mean, this is a typical nursing type question.
Nursing type question. The NCLEX exam for nursing is really interesting because it is multiple choice, but it is all critical thinking. And because it is all computerized,
It's computer adaptive testing.
Yes.
You
You can
take
have
the
as few
first
as-
question and you get
Yeah.
it right, you get a higher level question. So everybody that takes it thinks they failed it because there are 5 levels of question, and if you're doing great,
Yeah, right.
you test out at 75 questions, and your last 70 have probably been at the very highest level. But it adjusts to the student, and if they're kind of a borderline right there on the 75, passing or failing, they can go up to 200 and something.
240, I think.
40 questions.
240 questions.
And we've had students that have gone all the way up and passed, and gone all the way up and not been successful.
Yeah, that is a very sophisticated multiple choice system, and it's
That we're
all
trying to prepare them for.
it is all critical thinking. And that's why we need to give them these kinds of tests ourselves to prepare them for that kind of test. If they have to take a board exam, then you want to make sure that they have seen these kinds of questions before and that they know how to handle them. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. I understand it took 10 years to develop that test, that computerized version, and they.
Well, I wasn't teaching nursing then.
Yeah.
Just being tortured by that test.
Yes. So, at any rate, the point here is that higher level multiple choice questions are good because they are easy to grade. They're quick. Particularly if they're optically scanned, and if they're carefully crafted, you can see that you're really getting at some very important elements of thinking, and that's really what we're trying to push for here. Now, on page 11. Once again, keeping it simple, guidelines for writing the STEM, writing the responses, writing the item analysis. This is a little reference for you that you can carry away. Now, I don't have these next 2 slides in your handout, but I think the center can provide these later.
PowerPoint we can post on our website, yeah.
Yeah, because I want to talk about, once you get your printout back, what do you do then? Shout hallelujah, they all passed. No. You need to look at 2 things. Now, these 2 slides here are sort of generic. Every optical scanning machine, or different companies use different algorithms and things. But I'm going to try to explain to you the simplest thing you need to worry about. One is, you look at item 1. Answer is A. And you look at the, out of 30 responses, 23 got it right, and then they spread out over the distractors. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Item 2, B, 26 got it wrong, only 2 got it right. So there's a little red flag.
Miskeyed.
Could be miskeyed. There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip, as we used to say. And item 3, notice 13 answered correctly, but 13 answered A. Now, what is going on there? Is there something wrong? Are they confused? Is the item poorly written? What is going on here? Item 4, again, you have a spread here, but 8 answered A and 8 answered correctly D, but they're spread out almost evenly, almost the same number for each item. That looks like nobody had a clue as to what's going on. So just eyeballing this. I mean, this is easy to do. It's usually, most printouts, it's pretty easy to find, and you can look at each item and see how everybody answered it, and whether or not there's anything there to kind of make you suspicious of something. Now, I will say this, that in most of the ones I've seen, notice how nicely this lays out that 1 or 2 students always answered some of the distractors. That's typically not the case. They can usually figure out there's one that is just, not there. It's just, we can ignore that one, which is kind of problematic because that means that they have a 33 1/3% chance of guessing the correct answer if you can get it down to 3 of the 4 items, which is a threat to validity and reliability. So we really have to work at this business of getting distractors that are distracting. Yes.
But you're going for that bell curve. And although there may be a choice there, I don't want my nurse to make. So hopefully they have gotten the point in class that this is.
I am glad that is the answer to that question. You see, that is the thing. you have to understand, when you read the books on multiple choice testing, often they're written by psychometricians, which is very good. And psychometricians want spread. They want variability. But as teachers, we have to ask ourselves, if I did a good job and they studied, I want to see a better pattern. I don't want to see this pattern up here. I want to see a different pattern. I want to see a pattern where most of them are getting most of the answers correct. But you have to worry about that, because if everybody gets all of them correct, then you wonder whether or not somebody's got a copy of the test or something. But
Well, it's different when you're teaching in the lower division versus teaching in our upper division,
Yeah.
which is a competitive entry. By the time they've made it to upper division, we've weeded out,
yeah,
hopefully.
yeah, and that's a good thing. We always have to remember what we're trying to do here. So but it's important to look at the item distractors and just see how many picked each one, and whether or not there's some bizarre thing going on, like in item 2 and item 3 here, where there are a whole bunch of people picking the wrong item. Which leads me to our last slide, which is the item discrimination index. Now, I have used a very simple arithmetic model here. The software for the optical scanners use different kinds of models. If you were doing this by hand, you take half the students, top half of the students on the test, did the highest scores, versus the bottom half, 50%, 50%. That's easy to think of. Here you have 8 answered question number 1 correctly, 4 in the lower half answered it correctly, H minus L is 4, and divided by the number in each group, you have an index of 0.5. Well, that's pretty cool. It's about, that's reasonable. Question 2, 7 in the high group got it correct, 2 in the low group, H minus L is 5, so it's a slightly better index, slightly better predictor. That is, you want those who did well on the test, when you're looking at a particular item, to do well on that item. But on the third column, the third row here, we have 5 got it right in the high group, 6 in the lower group, giving it a negative discrimination index. Woo-hoo! Red flag. Something wrong here. Better look at that item. Because presumably, each item reflects the overall performance on the test. Now, what the software does in most of these things, it takes either the upper quartile versus the lower quartile, or some other slice, and it does it automatically for you, and it spits out a discrimination index. But basically, unless your software is really weird, it's going to look like this, and when you have a negative one, it's going to be bad. If it's around 0.5, 0.6, you're probably okay. Don't put more store in these numbers than they deserve. Teacher-made exams are made by amateurs. We're not psychometricians unless you are teaching psychometrics. We're not psychometricians. So our tests are not the carefully crafted machines that the SAT, the GRE are. Moreover, as you pointed out, we have a bias in favor of trying to ask questions that are going to measure what we taught, and if they studied it, they're going to do well. So there is a bias toward success when we're talking about a teacher-made test. But it's nonetheless important to double check with your data there to see how things are laying out, and whether or not there are some items that you just need to toss. You say, something wrong here. And if you can't figure it out, you can't reword it, they go in the trash can. And of course, the last thing you need to remember about testing is that there is no such thing as test security. There is no such thing as test security. Even if you collect all the question sheets and all the answer sheets and so forth and so on, there's leakage all around the edges. And we had one case a few years ago where there were a whole bunch of fraternity brothers in one class, Each fraternity brother memorized 5 questions, went back to the frat house and reconstructed the entire exam. You know, there are ways. So you need to, I mean, even if you sweated blood putting all those wonderful questions together, don't ask the same questions again. Modify them, change them. Flip the stem and the right answer. Sometimes you can just turn it on its head. You know, the right answer becomes the stem, and then you flip it so you're asking a different question. If questions have data, you change the numbers. There are various ways to do that. And so, but keep in mind, there's no such thing as test security. We can't do that. I believe we have a couple of more minutes available for general questions, if you like. Any pet questions you have about multiple choice testing or testing in general you would like to ask?
I want your opinion. I was taught 400 years ago, when I write multiple choice tests, to 1, don't do A, B, C, and then D, all the above. Do A, all of the below, all of those below, because they might read A, and that's correct, because the answer is D, all of the above. You see what I'm saying?
Well, what the test books tell us is try to avoid all of the above and none of the above, just in general. They should be straight.
Even like C and D below instead of...
Yeah, those are, if you go to
that,
if you go to the National Board of Medical Examiners website and you look at their manual, which is in your handbook there, the URL is right there. They have in the appendix a graveyard of items no longer used. And among those items is what they call the type K item, which is A and B, B and C, D and E, just mix and match. Because one of the things they've discovered is that we don't know what we're measuring when we do that. The student has to create a little truth table out in the margin there in order to figure out what question is being asked here.
That's what someone else told me later. They said, well, if you can't come up with 4 answers, don't ask the question.
That's a very good thing. Yes, that's very good. But one of the things I think I wanted to emphasize in here today is that you ask higher order questions, the application and analysis and evaluation, then you can come up with plausible distractors much more easily. And if you are doing calculations and things, by sitting there and working through the calculations and looking at all the different possible errors, you can easily come up with distractors that are plausible because the calculator says this is it. So and we know that the calculator is never wrong. It's a black box. It's truth in there somewhere. So, but those are very good questions. But it's better just to ask a straightforward question and give some straightforward responses there of possibilities for an answer, and go with it. And I think you'll be happier and they'll be happier. Other questions or comments? Yes.
I really enjoyed this seminar. I was just thinking about some of the challenges I have trying to assess our business programs, because that's what I do all the time. And a lot of our outcomes, what we want our graduates to be able to do, we have these learning goals.
Oh, yeah.
And trying to test their mastery of these goals using knowledge level questions.
Doesn't fit, does it?
Doesn't fit. And as I hear this lady here talking about the nursing, and you have to be able to tell this person, does this person have high blood pressure? Is this person, what condition is this person in? That's the kind of question she asks, so that when they go out to take care of folks, they can do that.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I don't think the business school gets that. gets the link between the application, because a lot of it is knowledge questions.
Yeah.
And for assessment, it has to be individual. We can't rely on teamwork or team projects for assessment purposes. So really, I'm still very fuzzy, even more fuzzy now after attending this class, about what they're actually able to do. Because our learning goals say our graduates will be able to go into the workforce and display these skills. And I'm not really convinced that our assessments now are really, that we're not getting a lot of these higher order questions in the exams that I'm using for assessment right now.
I think you're probably right, and I think that what that would require would be throwing out those old tests and thinking, working with faculty to come up with, well, use case studies in business. Case studies that measure these different skills. Case studies about finance, case studies about management, case studies about this, that, and the other, so that they would have to show that they could actually develop an answer to something. Now, these, I suppose these could be, these kind of upper-level multiple choice, but it would be better if they were essays.
Right, but no one's going to grade them.
No one's going to grade them.
Because the sections are
but,
so
but
large.
this gives you a way with these, with a case study and these choices. I've seen this done with law.
I
Law
mean, we can
cases.
do it with health problems, and I actually have a business degree from here.
Good for you.
You can do it with business case studies in each of the disciplines. I mean, of course, it's easier with accounting and finance than marketing and management, but it is possible that the old, when I was here in the 80s as a business major, of course, we were doing singular and group projects. But, I can see how if this guy took his psychology essay question and transferred it, that it can be done. It is very difficult because we are trying to go more and more application questions and getting extreme resistance from the students and freaking them out. And,
I have another question.
Yes.
If I've got 50 minutes, how many questions should I give the students?
Any suggestions for the man?
Is there any guidelines for knowledge questions versus application or
Yeah, you see that now you're getting
analysis
at a thing.
questions?
If you're asking recall, you can ask 50 questions.
I give them 2 minutes for higher level.
2 minutes for higher level.
2 minutes per question. Yeah, I wouldn't. If I had 50 minutes, I wouldn't ask more than 25 questions.
If they're upper level questions.
2 minutes.
We always said 30 seconds a question because you're probably going to have a mix of some recall. It'll take 5 seconds. And some will have a mix of the higher.
I don't. Mine are all.
But she doesn't. She
higher
doesn't
level.
mix them. So but that's a good rule of thumb. Some of these I have seen some, especially. I have some examples of law school multiple choice items, case-based items, and I think they might take 3 or 4 minutes each. So, but it is the advantage is that if they're carefully crafted, you're probably getting at the thinking skill you want, but you can't ask as many of them. You're not, which is a problem with sampling. You can't, the way sampling only works really well if you have a sense of how many items are at each level. And the thing is that what she's doing is really focusing on the higher level and saying, okay, I'm going to make a decision here. I will measure the higher levels and let the lower levels float. Now, there is an argument to be made for this, because if you think about some of those, like this psychology test, asking the higher level implied knowledge. They had to know those terms. We just didn't ask them to spit them back. We asked them to apply them in some way. So you can, if you craft them carefully, what is happening is that you are actually measuring the lower levels simultaneously. So there is a way out. But I'm with you on that. 25 questions in a 50-minute exam, if they're higher level, is probably about right.
Doesn't sound like very many.
Well, that means everyone has to be really, really good.
25, but you have to write them carefully.
Yes. Well, you've been a very good group this afternoon, and you will notice that my email address is on the front of this. If you have questions, if you want other examples, if you want to fight, whatever you want, email me. I'll be glad to correspond with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.